There are people who know something before they have permission to say it out loud. They know the battle is over, not because someone told them, not because the circumstances changed. They just know, the way you know the layout of your own home in the dark, the way your body navigates a familiar room without thinking. Something settled in them before the evidence arrived, and they've been sitting in that settled place, quietly waiting for the world to catch up. The final battle isn't the one you fight your way through. It's the one that ends because something above the battlefield made a ruling, signed it, sealed it, and the signing happened before you ever heard the news. What if that ruling wasn't won through force at all? What if it was won through something the opposition had no framework for? Hold that. Most of what gets said about spiritual warfare stays at the tactical level, the weapons, the armor, how you position yourself. That conversation has run its course. What matters now is what sits underneath the ending, the legal structure of it. Because you can't fully rest inside a victory you don't understand, some part of you stays braced, waiting for the next attack to confirm the last one was real. There's a law that governs every season of testing a person goes through. It runs whether you're aware of it or not, whether anyone around you names it or not. And the law is this: no period of spiritual testing, no season of deep purging, no sustained opposition can go on indefinitely. Every trial has a statute of limitations. That statute isn't set by whatever's opposing you, it's set by the court that outranks it, and that court holds the only authority that matters. I spent 17 years in a rented room in Leith. A cardboard box of research I couldn't release. Work that had cost me a lecture hall, a title, a life I'd spent decades building. What I learned in those years, not from books, but from the floor, was that every soul's assignment operates under a binding covenant. Bounded by time, bounded by what the architecture of that particular spirit can hold. You cannot be tested beyond what you were built to withstand, and when you've withstood it, when you've held through maximum pressure without losing the core of who you were made to be, something shifts in the structure beneath the visible world. Something shifts. The old word for it is equilibrium. And it doesn't mean what people usually think it means here. It doesn't mean you overpowered the opposition, or outlasted the trial until it gave up and wandered off. Equilibrium means the debt that justified the testing has been paid in full. The purpose has been fulfilled. The calibration is complete. And at the exact moment those scales balance, the higher court is required to act, not invited. Required. The same law that authorized the trial also governs when the trial must end. The court has no discretion. When the conditions are met, the decree goes out, what the old traditions called the final decree, not a ceasefire, not a pause, a formal injunction, unalterable, authoritative, issued against every form of active opposition, every system of environmental friction, every testing protocol running against your life. The decree states that the season has legally and spiritually satisfied its mandates. From that moment forward, anything continuing to operate against you is operating in violation of a higher order. The jurisdiction has shifted. The legal standing of the opposition has been revoked. They can still make noise, but noise without authority is just noise. Pause. The classical traditions I studied during those years had a name for this transition. 2 words, actually: Krisis and Apokatastasis. Krisis is where you've been living. The season of trial and discernment, where everything that could be shaken was shaken, where the fire burned away what wasn't built to last. Where you learned things about yourself that were only available through that particular kind of pressure. Krisis isn't punishment. It's a proving ground. It's a court in session, evaluating whether the vessel can hold what it was designed to hold. But Krisis has a legal endpoint. It was never meant to be permanent. Origen of Alexandria understood this in the 3rd century. He used the word apokatastasis to describe what follows, the mandatory, complete restoration of all things to their original, uncorrupted state. Mandatory, that word matters. Apokatastasis isn't a possibility. It's not something that might happen if conditions line up just right. It's the required outcome once Krisis has run its full course. The testing season doesn't taper off. It doesn't dissolve gradually. It ends through a definitive ruling, and everything held back during the testing is required to return. Sit with that. Required to return. The same legal structure that enforced the quarantine around your life, the isolation, the closed doors, the silence that made you wonder if God had forgotten where you lived. That same structure now enforces the release of what was held in waiting. The court that authorized the trial commands the restoration, and the restoration isn't partial. Everything delayed, everything withheld, everything blocked by opposition that had no right to block it but was permitted for a season to test the integrity of what you're made of. That ruling revokes what the source material calls active matrix contracts. You may not know that language, but you've felt what it describes. The invisible ceiling on your finances that made no sense no matter how carefully you managed, prayed, or gave. The relationship that quietly drained you while the other person moved through life unaffected. The health issue that wore down your body and your faith at the same time. Every one of those contracts is declared expired when the decree goes out, not weakened. Expired. Void. Unenforceable. What follows is a hard boundary enforced around your perimeter. You didn't build it. You don't maintain it. The court that issued the decree holds that responsibility. Every external system is required to align with the new baseline. The provision that couldn't reach you before now has a new address. Cease to petition. Those aren't suggestions. That's not faithlessness. It's the lag between what has shifted in the spirit and what the body knows how to hold. Closing that lag, that's the work ahead. Here's what no one tells you about the decree of absolute completion. If the battle ended not because you surrendered, but because your vessel held its core integrity through the entire stress test, if the spiritual architecture was forced to sign the decree because you simply refused to collapse, then what does victory actually feel like inside someone who carried the full weight of that war? Pause. Does it feel like triumph? Does it feel like exultation? Or does it feel like something heavier than you expected? A settling into the limbs that has no name in the language you've been speaking. The heaviness you're carrying right now. The exhaustion that sleep doesn't touch. The weight in your legs that makes standing feel like a negotiation is not depression. It's not cellular failure. It's not evidence that something went wrong or that the victory was incomplete. Clinical health psychology has documented this, named it the letdown effect, a profound neurobiological crash that happens when the human body moves abruptly from chronic, long-term stress into actual safety. The body doesn't know how to process peace when it's been running combat protocols for years. It only knows that the threat has dropped, and the machinery that kept you alive through the fire just received an order it has no existing script for. Stand down. And the result isn't celebration. It's collapse. Not the collapse of failure, the collapse of a structure that no longer needs to hold itself rigid against a pressure that has finally, permanently lifted. For years, your physical body ran underneath every spiritual battle you fought in a continuous state of activation. Your HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal system, your body's stress command center, maintained a sustained output of corticotropin-releasing hormone. That hormone cascaded through your adrenal glands and flooded your bloodstream with cortisol, epinephrine, and pro-inflammatory compounds like interleukin-6 and TNF-alpha. The chemical signature of an ongoing threat. This wasn't occasional. It wasn't a rough season. It was your baseline. Your heart rate was elevated for so long you stopped noticing it. Your digestion ran at a fraction of its capacity because a body under siege doesn't allocate resources to the stomach. It sends everything to the muscles, the senses, the systems that keep you alive. And your muscular system, the masseter in your jaw, the trapezius across your shoulders, the deep stabilizing muscles of your pelvic floor remained locked in a continuous low-grade tension. Not the tension of effort, the tension of bracing. The body learning, across years of real experience, that impact was always coming. How long have you been clenching your jaw? Can you feel it right now where your back teeth meet, the hinge just below your ear? When was the last time that muscle was fully let go? For many of you, the answer isn't weeks or months. You can't remember a time your jaw wasn't holding something. And your shoulders, how much closer to your ears have they drifted? The trapezius contracts as an involuntary shield over the carotid artery during chronic stress, and your body learned that posture so completely it stopped being a posture. It became the shape of you. This isn't metaphor. It's neuromuscular adaptation to a threat environment that was entirely real until the decree was signed. Your body wasn't wrong to arm itself. It was responding with precision to the conditions it was actually living inside. Then the conditions changed. The decree was signed, and the threat environment collapsed, not gradually, but instantaneously at the level of spiritual law. Your subconscious mind, which had been tracking that threat every second for years, registered the drop before your conscious awareness could name what had shifted. And that's when the neurochemical cascade begins. The hypothalamus stops releasing corticotropin-releasing hormone. The signal that had been screaming threat, the signal that kept your adrenal glands in overdrive, simply stops. And when it stops, serum cortisol doesn't taper gently, it plunges. The artificial biochemical stamina that carried you through years of burnout is withdrawn. The body, which had been running on fuel it was never designed to access for this long, discovers it has nothing left. The false floor collapses. What remains is a fatigue so total it feels like gravity has been turned up. Heaviness in the limbs, weight in the legs. The sense that even lifting your arm requires a decision you didn't used to have to make. This isn't weakness. It's the removal of a chemical prop that was never meant to be permanent. You're crashing because you're safe. Then the deeper restructuring begins. Dr. Stephen Porges, in what's now known as polyvagal theory, mapped the autonomic nervous system's response to safety with a precision that reads almost like a technical description of what your body is doing right now. The sympathetic fight-or-flight mobilization loop, the one that kept your heart rate elevated, your senses sharp, your muscles coiled, disengages. The nervous system drops into what Porges calls high-tone ventral vagal stabilization, the state of rest, connection, and actual safety. Interrupted by periods of dorsal vagal restorative stillness, the deepest shutdown the body knows. The state of the animal that has survived the chase and finally collapses into quiet to repair. Your resting heart rate slows. Your heart rate variability begins to recalibrate. Your cardiovascular system, which has been running a marathon for years, finally gets the order to walk. While all of this is happening, while your conscious mind's wondering why you can't seem to get off the couch, why sleep pulls at you like something deep and patient, something else is happening inside your skull. The brain's lymphatic system, the waste clearance network that does most of its work during deep sleep, opens up. Cerebrospinal fluid moves through the channels between your neurons, flushing out the residue of years of hypervigilance, inflammatory waste, oxidative byproducts, the cellular exhaust of a threat response that never got to stop. The brain has been holding all of that, storing it, and it has been waiting for the threat to drop, waiting for the first real sleep that followed. Now it's clearing, and that clearing asks something of you: stillness. Longer sleep than feels reasonable. Rest prioritized over output. For years, function was the only thing that mattered. Now restoration is. What you're experiencing is not a breakdown. The body isn't collapsing. It's restructuring, rebuilding its cellular architecture to hold a higher baseline of resting energy than you've ever been able to carry. The body that sustained years of combat has finished its assignment. The body that will inhabit what comes next is being built right now, inside the stillness, inside the heaviness you've been reading as failure. Everything you were ever taught about victory prepared you for exultation, for the moment the battle ends and you're standing on high ground with your arms raised. Instead, you're lying down. Instead, the body that fought for you is asking for a rest so deep it feels like surrender. Pause. And there's a question that hasn't been answered yet. What do you do with the armor? The armor that kept you alive. That became your second skin, that your body has been wearing so long it's forgotten how to take it off. If the war is over and the decree is signed, what happens to defenses that were never built to be permanent? What happens when the posture of combat becomes the very thing preventing you from receiving the peace you fought to reach? There's a structural truth inside the architecture of spiritual warfare that doesn't come naturally. When the war ends, your armor doesn't fall off on its own. It doesn't dissolve just because the threat has passed. The defensive structures you built to survive become the very thing blocking you from inhabiting the peace you secured. This is the ceasefire protocol, and its primary mandate is this: you cannot receive what a sovereign timeline carries while still wearing the heavy structures of a battlefield timeline. The vessel that fought the war cannot receive the peace. The posture that kept you alive cannot hold the abundance already moving toward you. You have to take the armor off deliberately, consciously, with your own hands. Because if you don't, the armor will block the very things you bled for. I want to be precise about what's at stake. Continuing to carry armor after a formal victory has been declared in the architecture of spiritual warfare is considered an act of treason against the peace. Not a minor adjustment. Not a habit you'll eventually outgrow. Treason. Because carrying those defensive habits, the constant suspicion, the auditing of people's motives, the scanning for the next betrayal, the bracing for financial collapse, emits a specific frequency, a high-density combat frequency. And that frequency creates resistance. It blocks what's already been allocated. It keeps high-integrity relationships from taking root. It keeps physical healing from settling in. I'm going to stop here for a moment because I know how some of that language lands. Combat frequency. Energetic resistance. I spent 17 years in a rented room with research in a cardboard box, and I have thought exactly that about language like what I'm using now. So I'm not asking you to believe the terminology. I'm asking you to test the outcome. Dr. Peter Levine, working in the field of somatic experiencing, gave this same phenomenon a different name. He called it character armor, the chronic muscular contractions the body uses to defend against unresolved threat. The jaw that won't unclench. The shoulders that lie near the ears. The breath that never fully reaches the bottom of the lungs. That's not poetry. That's tissue. That's fascia. That's a nervous system still running combat protocols long after combat has ended. And what Levine's research showed, what your body already knows, is that ongoing defensiveness blocks restoration, not metaphorically, functionally. The body cannot heal inside hypervigilance. It cannot receive what it's still bracing against. So the work in front of you right now isn't spiritual in the way you've been trained to think of spiritual work. It's not more prayer, more fasting, another midnight session of warfare. It's somatic, it's physical. It's the deliberate, conscious act of telling your nervous system it can stand down. The somatic ceasefire command requires 3 specific releases. I want you to do them now while I'm speaking, not later, not when this ends. Now. The first is unclamping the masseter, your jaw. The muscle that held your silence through every betrayal you didn't answer, every accusation you didn't dignify, every moment you swallowed what needed saying because speaking would have cost more than staying quiet. The masseter has been locked in a clench so long you've stopped noticing it's clenched. And that clenching isn't neutral, it engages the trigeminal nerve, which sends a continuous threat signal to the brainstem. Your jaw is telling your brain the war is still on, so release it. Let your bottom teeth separate from your top. Let the hinge go slack. Let your tongue rest soft against the floor of your mouth. There's nothing left to brace for. The second is dropping the trapezius, your shoulders, that involuntary shield held over your throat for years. The trapezius elevates during chronic stress to protect the vulnerable structures of the neck. It's a survival reflex, and you have been surviving for so long the reflex became permanent. Your shoulders are sitting closer to your ears than they were 3 years ago, probably closer than last week. Lower them now. Let the weight of your arms draw the shoulder blades down your back. Let the space between your earlobes and the tops of your shoulders widen. That gap, that new distance, is the physical measure of safety. The brainstem reads the drop. It registers that the environment is no longer threatening. Pause. Third, diaphragmatic expansion. Your breath. You've been breathing shallow for so long it feels normal. Short sips of air, just the top third of your lungs filling and emptying. That pattern keeps the body coiled, ready to move, ready to fight, ready to run. It signals to the vagus nerve that something is wrong, and the vagus nerve is the master switch for the entire parasympathetic system. The difference between combat mode and restoration mode. It won't shift until the breath tells it to. So breathe deep, abdominal, let the diaphragm drop. Let the belly expand. Let the inhale reach all the way down. Then let the exhale take longer, slower, emptying everything out. That long, slow exhale is what the vagus nerve has been waiting for. It's the body finally saying, I am safe enough to rest. Safe enough to release. Safe enough to stop. Once those 3 releases are in place, jaw slack, shoulders down, breath deep, something begins that you don't have to manage. The parasympathetic system engages. Heart rate comes down. The body enters a restoration state it's been trying to reach for years. This isn't metaphor. This is what's actually happening in your nervous system. Your spirit has already secured the victory. Your body just hasn't been told it's allowed to live there yet. But the somatic release is only half of it. The physical armor has a behavioral counterpart. The habits you built to survive in a hostile environment, the scanning, the constant low-grade monitoring of everyone around you for signs of the next betrayal, those are armor too. They run the same frequency. The same resistance. The same quiet interference against the peace that's trying to reach you. A complete ceasefire means strict non-engagement. You don't check on the opposition. You don't revisit old betrayals trying to make sense of them one more time. You don't attempt to prove your worth to rooms that already made their decision about you. You don't log back in. You don't ask a mutual friend how they're doing. You don't need to verify that things worked out the way they were supposed to. They did. The decree is signed. What was set in motion doesn't require your supervision to finish unfolding. There's an old line that speaks directly to this moment. Put up your sword into its sheath, for those who live by the sword shall perish by the sword. It doesn't mean violence returns to the violent. It means the mode you use to win the war is the mode you'll have to keep living inside. If you win by fighting, you'll have to keep fighting. If you win by vigilance, you'll have to stay vigilant forever. The whole point of a war that actually ends is that the survival mode becomes obsolete the moment the threat is gone. To keep holding the sword after the battle is over isn't defense, it's refusal. It's not letting the victory be complete. Laying down your weapons isn't surrender to an opponent, it's surrender to your own victory. It's you, in your body, in your room, right now, telling God, I believe it's over. I'm not bracing for the next hit. I'm not watching the horizon anymore. I'm not wearing armor that was issued for a season that has officially ended. And if you actually do this not as a concept you nod along to, but as a real, physical act of disarming, something shifts that no amount of striving could produce. The combat frequency drops. The resistance dissolves. And the things that have been circling, looking for somewhere to land the provision, the restoration, the healing, the right people, they finally find a surface soft enough to touch down on. Not a wall. Not a shield. A body at rest. A nervous system in peace. A vessel that's no longer fighting. Pause. I want to name the part of this that's hardest. The part most people skip. It's not the physical release, though that's genuinely difficult for a body that's forgotten how to rest. It's not the non-engagement, though that will feel like withdrawal for a while. The hardest part is the stillness that comes after, because when the armor comes off, when the combat frequency drops and the nervous system finally registers safety, what rushes into that space isn't immediately comfort. It's exposure. The raw, unguarded awareness of how tired you actually are, how much you've been carrying, how long you've been holding a posture that was never meant to be permanent. Standing down, actually standing down, not just agreeing with the idea of it, is the hardest thing a vessel trained for war will ever be asked to do, because everything in you has been conditioned to read stillness as vulnerability, rest as negligence, the absence of tension as the quiet before something breaks. That conditioning isn't weakness, it isn't imagination, it's muscle memory. A nervous system that learned through years of real threat that the only safe posture is the one braced for impact. And now the threat is gone, the decree has been signed, the opposition has been silenced, the perimeter is secured, and still the body holds the posture. Still the mind runs through scenarios at 2 in the morning, like the intelligence reports are still coming in and the war is still live. Still rehearsing exits from rooms that have no enemy in them. Still calculating risk in a landscape that has already been cleared. God isn't asking you to try harder to relax. That's not what this is. What's being issued right now, what settles into your spirit the moment you stop resisting it, is an order. A directive, the final sovereign command to a vessel that has completed its assignment. Stand down. The order to stand down isn't a suggestion. It isn't something to sit with and consider. It's the last instruction a soldier receives when the war has ended and the treaty is ratified and there is nothing left to defend against. The old texts call it the ascent mandate, the protocol for what happens after the mountain has been climbed. And what it commands is specific. Cease all striving, spiritual, mental, physical. Stop trying to manufacture outcomes through effort. Stop managing the timeline. Stop holding the perimeter with your own exhausted attention. The striving was necessary. It's what got you up the mountain, but it was always a tool for a season. And the season has closed. There is a word for this in Hebrew, Psalm 46:10. The verse everyone quotes but almost no one traces back to its root. * be still and know that I am God. *. The Hebrew word for be still is * Rapha *, and Rapha doesn't mean calm your mind, or try to feel peaceful, or breathe through it. It translates to something far more physical. Relax your hands, let your grip go limp, drop the posture, cease striving. It's an explicit order to stop manufacturing outcomes through effort. Not because the outcomes won't come, but because your effort is no longer what brings them. The mountain has been climbed. Whatever comes next doesn't arrive through your labor. It arrives through your placement. And your placement is already correct. I sat in a rented room in Leith for 4 years fighting the instinct to hustle my way out of a silence God had deliberately placed me inside. And the thing I couldn't hear then, the thing I can hear now, because the noise of my own striving has finally dropped, is that the silence was never empty. The silence was the throne, and the striving was the only thing keeping me from sitting in it. Because sitting requires trusting that the seat will hold, that the kingdom will organize itself around your presence without your hands on every lever. Low-frequency consciousness believes it has to continuously manage, defend, and control just to maintain position. Sovereign consciousness understands that once the mountain has been climbed and the peak has been secured, the only operational requirement is to sit quietly and let the kingdom arrange itself around you. That is the ultimate demonstration of authority, not the striving, not the proving, not the sleepless nights running scenarios at 2 in the morning. The sitting, the resting, a vessel so completely secure in its placement that it no longer reaches for anything it receives. The inheritance arrives not because you pulled it through with effort, but because the gates were already open and the delivery was already in transit. So you are hereby commanded to stand down. Let the grip fall. Drop the posture. The war is over, and the throne has been waiting the entire time you were fighting to find it. Pause. The confirmation arrives inside a body still learning to recognize peace. And it doesn't come as something vague, a feeling you have to interpret, a shift you have to talk yourself into believing. It comes as something specific, trackable, real. The first token is somatic. Within the next 48 to 72 hours, your body will do something you didn't ask it to do. An involuntary exhale, deep, full, beginning somewhere below the ribs and traveling upward like a release valve that's been rusted shut for longer than you can name. You won't decide to take a deep breath. It will take you, and on the other side of that exhale, a wave of coolness will move down the length of your spine. Not dramatic, no music, no revelation. It will simply arrive. That is the physical signature of your vagal nerve registering, possibly for the first time in your adult life, that the environment you're standing in is completely safe. Nothing to brace against. Nothing approaching from around a corner. The vagus nerve, which spent years running threat detection inside your body, finally receives the signal it's been waiting for. It responds by opening, cooling, releasing a tension you didn't know you were holding, because holding it had become your baseline. Your body has been waiting to do this since the court sealed the file. The second token is environmental. In that same window, the next several days, maybe a week, a quietness descends on your daily life that doesn't have an ordinary explanation. Friction that has been a constant companion just lifts. Long-standing disputes that consumed months of your attention resolve without your intervention, not because you finally found the right words or the right person to call, because the opposition driving them has gone silent. Legal stalls that felt permanent dissolve. Family dynamics that produced a low-grade tension for years shift, not through apology or the conversation you'd rehearsed, but because whatever was feeding the conflict has been withdrawn. People who seemed to exist only to oppose you go quiet, or leave your orbit entirely. Not by your hand. You wake one morning and realize the hum of resistance that shaped every decision has stopped. Pause. The silence may feel strange. Your nervous system was trained inside a war zone, and war zones don't go quiet without reason. But this isn't the quiet before something breaks. It's the quiet after something has concluded. The forces arrayed against you aren't regrouping. They're gone, and the silence they leave is the sound of a perimeter permanently sealed. The third token is numeric. Over this same window, your environment will show you 2 specific sequences, repeatedly 999 and 1111 across timestamps, transaction confirmations, document numbers, confirmation codes. Anywhere a number can appear, 999 is the seal of absolute completion. The trial cycle, the entire architecture of testing and endurance and refinement that shaped your existence longer than you've had words for, is finalized. Not winding down, finished. The file is closed. The covenant is fulfilled. 1111 is the master gate sequence, confirming your vessel has crossed the threshold. You're no longer in the preparation chamber, no longer in the wilderness. You're standing on sovereign ground, the ground your architecture was always being made ready to occupy. These numbers aren't coincidence. They're signposts from a system that has been tracking your progress since before you knew there was a system, arriving persistently until the certainty inside you anchors deeply enough that you no longer need them to confirm what you already know. The fourth token is the deepest. You'll notice a shift in how you relate to your own history. The urge to explain yourself will simply be absent. For years, maybe decades, you carried the invisible weight of needing to be understood. Needing people to know why you made certain decisions, why you walked away from certain things, why you stayed silent when everyone expected you to speak. Pause. The silence may feel strange. Your nervous system was trained inside a war zone, and war zones don't go quiet without reason. But this isn't the quiet before something breaks, it's the quiet after something has concluded. The forces arrayed against you aren't regrouping, they're gone. And the silence they leave is the sound of a perimeter permanently sealed. The third token is numeric. Over this same window, your environment will show you two specific sequences, repeatedly 999 and 1111 across timestamps, transaction confirmations, document numbers, confirmation codes. Anywhere a number can appear, 999 is the seal of absolute completion. The trial cycle, the entire architecture of testing and endurance and refinement that shaped your existence longer than you've had words for, is finalized, not winding down. Finished. The file is closed. The covenant is fulfilled. 1111 is the master gate sequence, confirming your vessel has crossed the threshold. You're no longer in the preparation chamber, no longer in the wilderness. You're standing on sovereign ground, the ground your architecture was always being made ready to occupy. These numbers aren't coincidence. They're signposts from a system that has been tracking your progress since before you knew there was a system, arriving persistently until the certainty inside you anchors deeply enough that you no longer need them to confirm what you already know. The fourth token is the deepest. You'll notice a shift in how you relate to your own history. The urge to explain yourself will simply be absent. For years, maybe decades, you carried the invisible weight of needing to be understood. Needing people to know why you made certain decisions, why you walked away from certain things, why you stayed silent when everyone expected you to speak.